Since I defend the LGBTQ+ community so much, a lot of people have been asking me about Xenogenders because they're becoming a big criticism against the community, and if I change my mind about the community because of the involvement of Xenogenders. To be completely honest, I don't even like the old genders, so if you're asking me about the new genders, you are asking the wrong person. Gender to me has always been irrelevant, and I never understood why people made such a big deal out of it, cis people included. Like, you'd think someone with their gender perfectly aligned to their body wouldn't care, but no, apparently it's a hill for some to die on. That being said, I've grown more understanding of why people hold their gender identity close to their hearts, and I've also come to learn why I don't care. Maybe it's not important to me, but maybe it's important for somebody else, and I have no place to judge what's important to them and what's not. When you hold your gender identity as part of who you are, I understand that it feels like you aren't being seen properly. I get why that matters now. Respecting someone's identity isn't hard, and for a lot of people, it's one of the few ways they feel understood in a world that constantly tries to box them into categories. When I first found out what Xenogenders were, I'll admit I was really hostile towards them, and not because I had any real reason to be, but simply because I didn't understand them. And let's be real, most of us get a little irrationally angry when we don't understand something. Like, you know that feeling when you buy a new electronic device and for some reason you can't figure out how to use it? Like, it's just a speaker, it shouldn't take this long to connect to my phone. Kinda like that. So yeah, when I first heard about Xenogenders, my gut reaction was less, oh, interesting, and more, what the hell is this? It's not a good look, and I realize now that I wasn't approaching it with the curiosity and open-mindedness it deserved. I've talked about it a little bit in my older videos, like my labels video, where I mentioned neopronouns and Xenogenders. Looking back, I know my tone came off very condescending. That wasn't my intention, but I understand why I rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and for that, I want to apologize. I think the real reason that people get so riled up about Xenogenders and neopronouns is because they think they're being forced to use them. It's not even about the existence of Xenogenders, it's the idea that someone out there might ask them to use a pronoun or identity that they're unfamiliar with. A lot of people love to say that Xenogenders and neopronouns make a mockery of the trans community, which already faces an overwhelming amount of scrutiny, and I do understand where that criticism comes from. On the surface, it seems like adding all these layers of complexity could give people more reason to invalidate trans identities. So much of the criticism surrounding neos assumes that the people using them are trying to make life as complicated as possible, but when you actually talk to someone who uses neos, you realize it's really not that deep, and they know that too. One of the biggest gripes that I had was that neopronouns are just proper nouns, not pronouns. But when I brought this up, a bunch of people who uses neo were just like, yeah, exactly, so you can just use them like proper nouns. No defensiveness, no drama. They were so chill about it. It turns out they know it's not that serious. They're just saying, here's how I feel comfortable being referred to. That's it. It's like someone saying, hey, I prefer being called my nickname instead of my full name. Sure, it might take a second to get used to, but it's not the end of the world. They are genuinely not making things harder for anybody. Like, when people say it complicates trans identities, if someone is struggling to understand trans identities or non-binary concepts, that is not because of Xenogenders or neopronouns, it's because of their own biases or lack of education. They were already trying not to understand trans people in the first place, they're just using Xenogenders as an excuse. Another thing I've noticed is that most people who use neopronouns also still use traditional ones. Like, most of them are not completely throwing out he, him, she, her, or they, them. They're just adding more options to reflect how they see themselves. It's like having a wardrobe full of outfits for different occasions. Sometimes they might go with the classic they, them, and other times they might feel like Star or Star Self. Star isn't hurting anyone, and you don't have to use Star's pronouns because you don't have to talk about Star. You can't have too many pronouns, it's going to confuse everyone. Do you think that someone having more pronoun options takes away from your ability to use he, him, and she, her? Are we running out of pronouns? Is there a limited supply? Honestly, it kind of reminds me when I was a little kid, and I would get irrationally mad at people for having more than one favorite color. Like when someone would say, oh, my favorite color is blue and black, and I'd be like, it's called a favorite color, not favorite colors. You get one. Pick a side. Like, I genuinely thought if someone claimed two colors, they were taking them off the market and no one else could have them. I am not joking. Like, my mom used to say her favorite color is rainbow, and I used to get upset that she wouldn't pick one color of the rainbow, so she picked yellow. And I thought to myself, ugh, thank you for finally being logical. I was just being a bratty little tyrant that cared about something that didn't matter at all. The idea that neopronouns are confusing, too much, or inaccessible is honestly overblown. If you're willing to learn someone's nickname, a term of endearment, or a pet name that they like, you are already capable of using neopronouns. The barrier isn't the pronouns themselves, it's people's unwillingness to step outside of their comfort zones. So yeah, I do understand the anger. I really do, because I used to be that bratty kid yelling at people for liking too many colors. But eventually, I grew up and realized that other people's preferences don't threaten mine. People are complex, and sometimes that complexity means that they want to use multiple pronouns or ones that feel unconventional. It's just another way of people to express who they are. What's even wilder is that the people complaining the loudest are often the ones who aren't even being asked to use Xenogenders. Like, nobody's walking up to these folks demanding that they memorize every single pronouns or commit to anything beyond basic respect. Like, there was some teacher who teaches about neos and xenopronouns on TikTok, and they get so much backlash. And for what? For trying to spread understanding, for being cringe? Being cringe is not a crime. It used to be, but not anymore. They're just a kind, sweet person trying to educate people about neos and xenopronouns. They don't even use neos themselves. They're just teaching about them. Yet they get so many comments on how they're confusing people and making a mockery out of non-binary and trans people, even though they're non-binary. It's cringe. Okay? Then just let it be cringe. Stop trying to amp it up into something that it's not. These people are not dangerous, and you know that. You infantilize them so much that you have to know that, right? That person teaching about xenogenders wasn't hurting anyone. They were literally just making content for people who wanted to learn. If that doesn't include you, if you don't want to learn about that, you can scroll past it. The concept of cringe has always been used to police behavior that's outside of the norm. People call emo kids cringe, they call furries cringe, they call anyone who is just happy cringe. It's a convenient way to dismiss something without actually engaging with it. But at the end of the day, cringe is just the freedom to be yourself in a way that might not align with societal expectations. Or in short, to be cringe is to be free. I'm not calling you pizza self or mud self, okay? Then don't. You don't have to announce it. People with neos have names. If you don't want to use their neopronouns, you can just use their name. They just want to feel seen and respected, and you have the option to use whatever you're comfortable with, so why are we even fighting about this? Well, another big concern is that some teachers are going by xenogenders and are expecting their students to respect that. People think that their kids will be confused in school because their small, feeble minds won't be able to comprehend it. While I'm not a teacher, I'm a child's therapist, so teachers and my line of work are very similar. Younger kids around like 5 to 10 years old will often ask me if I'm a girl or if I'm a boy. They're obviously not looking to dissect my identity, they're just curious in the moment, so I will ask them in return, what do you think I am? Some of them will say a boy, some of them will say a girl, and sometimes they'll say very random things. I think you're a cat, you're a mermaid, I think you're a pizza, and every time, no matter what they say, I'll say, yes, how did you know? Now, contrast that with teenagers or adults who ask me the same questions, but they'll be a lot more rigid about their answer, like, you look like a woman, but I know you're actually a man. Older teenagers and adults who have the capacity to understand are the ones who care about gender and fitting into gender boxes because they've internalized that gender and identity are linear, not the helpless, stupid little kids that you think they are. That's why I find it so funny when people get upset that I use multiple pronouns, especially when he, him is a part of it. My darlings, if he, him makes you uncomfortable, use she. If she isn't your thing, go with they. It is not a test, and it is not that deep. More and more people have been asking me what my gender identity is because I use all 3 traditional pronouns, and honestly, I answer the same way. What do you think I am? Whatever they respond with, I say, yep, that's right. To the little girl who thinks I'm a man, yep, I'm a man. To an adult stranger who thinks I'm a woman, yes, I'm a woman. If my friends call me non-binary or gender fluid, that's me too. If you want to get on a deeper level, someone in my comment section introduced me to the gender label gender apathic, which means I genuinely don't care what people call me, and that pretty much sums it up. I'm not trying to confuse anyone or make a grand statement. My approach to gender is simply that it doesn't hold much weight in my life. The point is, this supposed confusion is entirely manufactured by adults who overthink everything. Kids don't overanalyze pronouns or get upset if someone defies their expectations. If anything, they're way more adaptable and open-minded than most adults I meet. So when people claim that teachers or therapists who use xenogenders or multiple pronouns are going to confuse kids, it's just so obvious that they're projecting their own discomfort onto children. Some other teachers who aren't cisgendered answer differently to the "what are you" question. Like, I used to be a girl, I was born a boy, I'm a teacher. How does that pertain to math? And those answers are perfectly fine too. Being non-binary or xenogendered as a teacher does not necessarily mean that they're too confused to teach. There will always be bad teachers, but identifying with a xenogender alone does not make them a horrible influence around kids. You know why? Because kids don't care. If you tell a small child, "call me a mushroom today," if they like you enough, they will. Of course, people that identify with xenogenders have the entire capability to be bad teachers, just like gay teachers, just like trans teachers, but their queerness or gender identity does not equate to a bad influence around kids, because their behavior does. Like, imagine a cisgendered female teacher talking inappropriately about her body to her students. That behavior would clearly make her unfit to be around kids, but it's not because she's a cis woman, it's because her actions cross professional boundaries. The same standard applies to xenogendered teachers as well. Their ability to teach and maintain a safe environment for kids isn't about their identity, but about their conduct. The argument that queer or xenogendered teachers are inherently harmful to kids is just another way to reinforce prejudice under the guise of protecting children. But kids are far more adaptable and open-minded than adults give them credit for. They don't get tripped up by people's pronouns or identity unless the adults around them teach them to react that way. People act like xenogenders are some looming threat, a massive force determined to tear down the foundations of society. Honestly, I think they wish they had that level of power just for the chaos, but they don't. You're the one giving them that power by being so pressed about it. You are just giving them way too much credit. Even the people who do actually identify as animals, like that Vine on all levels except physical "I'm a wolf" guy, sure, it's silly, but beyond that, who cares? But they're delusional and they need to grow up, okay? But why? What if being delusional makes them happy? Is it really so bad to let someone exist in a way that doesn't hurt anyone? Forcing someone to conform to your version of reality just because you don't understand theirs isn't fair. But they're going to influence our kids! Influence them to what? Pretend to be a frog and have fun? Kids already do that. You don't need to act like children are going to spiral themselves into rebellion because someone on the internet identifies themselves as star self. Newsflash, kids are already weird. They make up their own rules, they play pretend all the time, and somehow still grow up into functioning adults. Xenogenders are not the downfall of civilization, and people need to stop pretending like it is. Yet somehow, they've become the scapegoat for every anti-LGBTQ+ argument ever, as if someone identifying as cat self is what's truly unraveling the fabric of reality. I watched some conservative commentator talk about xenogenders, and she seemed to get really defensive when the person she was watching said, "Neopronouns aren't about you."
Could be a day where you meet someone who uses neopronouns. More than likely though, you won't, because they don't even want to be near somebody who won't respect their pronouns. So just take a deep breath, and remember, the world doesn't revolve around you.
It's so funny that the person who is equipping people with pronouns to refer to themselves as like Starburst and Lorax and Lemon is telling other people that the world does not revolve around them. It's almost like the very act of choosing neopronouns is insinuating that the world somehow revolves around you because you, a regular he, him, or she, her like everybody else, thinks that you are so unique and special that you deserve your own set of pronouns that you've picked from the sky and told people that they need to respect. I try to be as sympathetic as possible to some of these ideas that are coming out right now, but I'm also going to be truthful in that the people who are adhering to normal pronouns are not the ones who think the world revolves around them.
You don't need to make everything a political battleground. Getting mad over xenogenders is the equivalent of getting mad at someone for having a My Little Pony persona. The phrase "it's not about you" from people who use xenogenders isn't some self-centered demand for attention or a way to make others cater for them. When they say that, they're not asking you to change your entire worldview or prioritize their identity above everything else. They're simply telling you that their existence or how they identify is not something that you need to worry about. It's a way of saying, relax. This isn't something that affects you unless you choose it to make it your business. They're essentially inviting you not to get involved in something that doesn't require your input. In fact, most people with xenogenders are just asking for the basic courtesy of being left alone. The message behind "it's not about you" is we're over here doing our own thing. You don't need to understand it, agree with it, or even think about it. Just don't make it your mission to tear us down. That's it. That's their message. The argument that people with neopronouns think that they're so unique and special that they deserve their own set of pronouns that they picked from the sky is actually kind of backwards. Some of the neo users I've met actually believe that gender isn't something special, and neither is pronouns. So they believe that having fun with their pronouns and what they call themselves shouldn't matter either, because it doesn't have to be only she, he, and they. It can be so much more because it doesn't fucking matter. People who stick to traditional pronouns often see them as the only valid options because that's what they've grown up with. It's familiar, it's safe, it's what they know, and that's fine too. But to assume that stepping out of those boundaries is an act of selfishness or narcissism, that's a bit of a stretch. For those using neopronouns, it's often less about being unique and more about dismantling the rigid structures that say gender and language have to operate in a certain way. They're saying if this doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, why can't we have a little fun with it? It's not an attack on traditional pronouns, it's just an expansion of what's possible. And this expansion doesn't take away anything from people who prefer traditional pronouns. You don't have to lose access to he, she, and they just because someone else is using star, bug, or cat. Pronouns, proper nouns, and words in general aren't a finite resource. The argument that neopronouns demand too much or complicate things usually stems from resistance to change, not genuine difficulty. It's the same kind of pushback that once greeted other shifts in language, like the singular they them, or the use of Ms. instead of Miss or Mrs., and yet society adapt. We always do. I don't think people with neos think that they're better than everyone else. And even if they do, changing their pronouns is not the biggest problematic result of that. The world does not revolve around traditional pronouns, just like it doesn't revolve around neopronouns either. However, I want to say that there's one argument for neopronouns and xenogenders that I don't really like. That is, you don't get xenogenders because xenogenders were made for neurodivergent, specifically autistic people. First of all, no, they weren't. The idea of describing oneself through abstract or metaphorical concepts is ancient. Writers, poets, and artists have been doing this for centuries. They didn't call it xenogenders, but they used nature, animals, celestial bodies, and other abstract symbols to describe facets of their identity or inner world. Think about how someone might say, I feel like a lone wolf, or I've always been a night owl. These are metaphors used to express something deeper about themselves. The modern concept of xenogenders builds on this tradition. It is simply an extension of the very human tendency to find meaning and identity in the abstract. Saying xenogenders were made specifically for neurodivergent people also ignores the broader cultural history of metaphorical and symbolic self-expression. Cultures around the world have long used animal totems, spiritual archetypes, and cosmic symbols to define identity or roles within their communities. These practices weren't tied to neurodivergence. They were tied to humanity's natural inclination to explore identities in ways that go beyond binary categories. By attributing xenogenders solely to neurodivergent people, you are not only simplifying history, you're boxing neurodivergent people into a narrative that does not serve them. It turns a broad, universal human behavior into a niche coping mechanism that only puny, neurodivergent, mentally handicapped people need, which diminishes both the legitimacy of xenogenders and the agency of neurodivergent individuals. Use whatever labels resonate with you, but let's not rewrite history to make it seem like these ideas only exist because of neurodivergence. This defense, while well-intended, inadvertently feeds into the infantilization of neurodivergent individuals. It frames them as needing special words or simplified tools to navigate gender, which is both patronizing and reductive. And I'm saying this because a lot of autistic people have closed themselves off to the idea of neopronouns because of this broad statement. This oversimplification does more harm than good too, because then it gets people to start cherry picking who is allowed to use neopronouns and who isn't, based on whether or not they're neurodivergent. Therefore, by tying them solely to neurodivergence, you're not only alienating neurotypical people who might find comfort in them, but also reducing neurodivergent individuals into a stereotype because autistic people can't understand normal things. If you're neurodivergent and neopronouns have helped you find yourself, that's wonderful. But neopronouns aren't exclusive to neurodivergence, nor are they inherently tied to it. They're an option for anyone exploring identity and framing them as anything else, risk shutting people out of the conversation rather than inviting them in. At the end of the day, most people using xenogenders are just people trying to live their best life. They're trying to express themselves in a way that feels authentic to them, not wage some war against traditional gender pronouns. Sure, it might not make sense to everyone, but that doesn't mean it's inherently harmful. Self-expression isn't a threat. It's the same as dyeing my hair a non-natural color. That said, there are boundaries to self-expression that shouldn't be crossed, and I feel like I need to acknowledge that before this video ends. The only valid criticism of neopronouns that I can think of is that when people use slurs, offensive terms, or culturally inappropriate labels as their new pronouns. I feel like this is obvious, but using racial slurs, derogatory language, or sacred religious terms as pronouns is so disrespectful and very harmful. For example, trying to use a sacred religious title like God's self as a pronoun just outright ignores the cultural and spiritual significance that those terms hold to millions of people. Do not use disrespectful words if you want people to respect the words you use. Words carry weight and meaning behind their aesthetic or creative appeal, and dismissing that reality disrespects the very concept of pronouns as tools for communication and understanding. The same goes for using historically offensive terms. You might think it's edgy or funny, but all it does is alienate people who could otherwise be allies. When you use harmful or dishonorable language to define yourself, it creates an unnecessary conflict and dilutes the validity of other people's self-expression. When you use offensive words as pronouns, they give ammunition to those looking for any excuse to tear down the entire community. The people using xenogenders to express themselves are always used as an example to showcase, wow, look how weird this entire group of people are. But if someone claims they hate trans people because of xenogenders, it's not really about xenogenders at all. Because when I think of the trans community, xenogenders and neopronouns don't even pop up for me. So when someone says that, it just feels like they're looking for a convenient excuse to validate their existing prejudice. It's the same tired argument we've heard before. I don't hate trans people, I just don't want them to go to the bathroom. I don't hate trans people, I just think using Z-them goes too far. No. You hate trans people and you need an excuse. So to answer the question at the beginning, no, I don't think xenogenders are ruining the LGBTQ+ community. And no, they don't make me rethink my support for trans people either. Just remember, if you're going to use them, do so responsibly and respectfully. Don't hurt others in your pursuit of self-expression, and please don't allow people who already hate your community to use your harmless identity as a weapon. Or do what you want. I can't stop you. That's just me. Laters.